Welcome, everyone, to our second presentation of the day for the Chief Growth Officer Summit. Today, we're honored to have with us Lynette Zanders, CEO of Wild Alchemy, who is going to share her insights on strategic planning and market analysis for 2024. This is an excellent presentation, dovetails what Stacy presented earlier. In one of their segments, she talked about creating a marketing plan and how majority of marketers do not have a plan for their marketing that is written down, documented, and agreed on throughout the organization. So this is a really good one coming out of that one. I hope you take lots of notes. We'll post these so you can go back and review it, as well as we're creating a little online community where you can, for those participants, can come in and ask Lynette questions afterwards. So without further ado, Lynette, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited. It's one of my favorite topics.
Oh, very excited as well. To get started, so the audience get to know you better before we jump into your presentation, you have a very inspiring story and journey. We talked about that in our last podcast. Can you share with us pivotal moments in your career that shaped your approach to writing briefs?
Absolutely. I will just say the biggest one by far was my first job at my first agency, the Richards Group, owned by Stan Richards. It's one of the second largest privately owned ad agencies in North America. And I was one of the very first American planners in the U.S., so I've been doing it the longest. I've learned from the best. And he said, you know, if you cannot get it down to a one page that can be shared in hallways, the gist of it, then nobody's going to read it, nobody's going to remember it, and it'll never get into the creative work. Clients won't remember it, and then it won't have impact. And I watched this happen over years, like even at Adidas, where they kind of all had worked together for a long time and kind of had a, this is what we want to do, like, what we want to do. But there were always do-overs. And as soon as we actually wrote it down and everybody agreed to it, they said, oh my God, we're doing better work. It takes us less time and we're having many fewer circular conversations, which I call stupid fights. So they're having more fun in the process. But I've watched this for 20 years. That's why I wrote a book about it. It's I think the brief is the closest thing to a silver bullet that I've found for my clients.
Love it. And since I've been rubbing shoulders with you at podcasts and these different summits, that I've been able to take your lessons learned, and I do briefs all the time now. But without further ado, I thank you. Let's get started. I'm super excited to hear this presentation on, going deep into briefing strategies.
All right, let's roll. I'll forewarn you guys that I tend to, I don't mean to over-deliver, but I'm ambitious in my agendas. So I have a great deal to share with you here. Mother briefs are master strategies. They are high-level business, brand, and creative strategies. And it really is just creating alignment through the articulation of things, the documentation of things. And Stephen, my slides are advancing, but I'm not seeing it advance on yours, so let me know if we're having issues.
I'm still on the first one, so maybe you have to play. Let me do the play, or you may have to reshare it. Sometimes it gets stuck.
It gets stuck. All right.
Yeah, so maybe stop sharing. Yep, there we go. And we'll share it one more time.
All right. Don't we love technology?
We do.
All right, I'm going to try this.
There we go.
And I'll just
coming on.
There we go.
Yep.
Hopefully
I got a
it'll
quote
carry on. Good.
Yeah.
So this is just one that I found that I, love things that support my my experience. And the Independent Business Coalition says basically, if you have detailed documented systems and protocols, you have an 80% success rate. But a lot of private independently held companies that don't take the time to do this have an 85% failure rate. So when I go into companies as a consultant, they're either in trouble or they can't get to the next level. But most of the time, they just haven't taken the time to document things. I won't go into detail. I will just say it's not my first rodeo, and I have seen the effects help companies win big. One, for example, the Apothic wine. There's so many wine brands out there, and a very strategic approach and a very aligned team. We met our 5-year goals in 6 months, and they're very, very happy. So a brief will help you with clarity, obviously putting words to things. It helps commit to a path because we have written it down and held hands and said, yes, this is the way we're going. It helps with consistency, especially if you have freelancers or external agencies that you work with. Streamlines decision-making processes. Like I said before, fewer stupid fights. Really helps ignite powerful ideas. It can be a springboard and should be an inspiration for the people creating work. And saves creative resources. Like you do the work at the front end so that you're not killing your creative people at the back end. And I say creative people, it could be expressions, as I said, but also could be new products, it could be new markets, could be new audiences. So strategy can create alignment. So I say alignment is as important as strategy, but a good strategy can create alignment. And ultimately, you're saving do-overs. It's going to be more efficient. It's going to be more productive. It's going to save your margins. I have been doing this for a very long time, and I have worked on just about everything, but I really love passion brands. And the agencies at the bottom, I've helped run departments for, but I've worked with White & Kennedy freelance since the beginning of my career, and they're some of my favorites, so I always call them out. So business strategy, it can, there are books on it, but I've got some really simple frameworks that help develop business strategies. And you'll hear this a couple times today. If you follow the money and the love, you're not going to go far wrong. And I'll explain what I mean by that. This is actually a Nike framework, and they call it lions, horses, and dogs. And you can use this for your products, and you can use it for your clients. It's Parrott's Law. 80% of revenues come from 20% of your customers. 80% of revenues come from 20% of your products. So know who those lions are. Those are your lions. Horses are opportunities. They're things that haven't quite shown up yet to be a lion, but they also haven't fallen down into being a dog yet. And being a horse is purgatory. They don't stay there forever. You just develop specific strategies to see if they're going to move up or down the ladder. And dogs are those that suck up all your time and energy. You don't make a lot of money on them, and they just don't do much for you. They're squeaky wheels. So the rule of thumb is you feed your lions, you make sure they're wildly happy, you focus on them, you ride your horses and develop strategies against them, and you quiet your dogs. So flipping the script and not spending all your time and energy trying to fix those squeaky wheels. Lions tend to be very quiet, and they tend to get overlooked. So this is a really helpful framework to kind of refocus your attention. And being a skier and a motorcyclist and a boater, the same rule of thumb is where you focus your attention is where you go. So if you want to ski trees, if you focus on the tree and say, don't hit the tree, don't hit the tree, don't hit the tree, you're going to hit the tree. You have to change your perspective and focus on the spaces. Space, space, space. And if you only see spaces, you only find spaces. And it's a little bit like focusing on lions, because the dogs are going to be the ones that are vying for your attention. But you got to focus on the lions. So this is just, if this is one of those things, just write it out. What I have done with some companies, though, is I get people to do this individually, and I found an entire executive team had completely different products and completely different clients and completely different customers in each one of these sections. So a lot of it is having the conversation and making sure that you are in alignment on who are your lions, who are your horses, and who are your dogs. So lions are fiscally responsible for the majority of the lion's share of your revenues, but They can also be your ambassadors, people who provide the lion's share of the love for your company. It could be your fans on social media. It could be the products that you like to work on. It could be the clients you like to work with. And then there's also some marquee value, meaning that it'll help you get other new business. So if you have Nike on your resume, for example, that is high marquee value. People go, ooh, if you work for them, maybe you could work for me. I will say, if you live in the Northwest and you haven't worked on Nike, there's something wrong, but that's a different conversation. There are also 3 main doors to walk in, and you need to define where to put your focus. So I have worked for several companies that are just producing new products, like constantly. A lot of them are in the consumer packaged goods space. And one of the main things we found when we were writing a mother brief together was some of them were focused on one strategy, some of them were focused on another, and yet another on a third. So they hadn't really aligned on priorities. So this is a bullseye, obviously. So one key strategy is in the center is to saturate your current market. Make sure that you know who your core customers are, your cultists, your core products, and saturate that. Make sure you have that, you own it. And then you can kind of radiate that out like a lighthouse to find other like-minded people. The second strategy is the middle rung, which is to steal share. So, okay, if we've saturated our market, we can't sell them any more of our stuff. So let's go steal share. And we got to identify which competitors we're going to steal from and what are the strategies to do that. And then the third rung is to grow the category. And that's to get new users to your category who haven't played in that space before. I will say that a lot of clients want to start there, and you can only grow the category, or you only should try to grow the category if you are the market leader. Because if you spend money trying to get people to, use creamer for the very first time, they're all going to buy the market leader's brand and not a challenger brand. So first and foremost, own your current market. Easiest way to get more money is to sell to your existing customers. Then the second one is to steal share, but it's really, really difficult to do both of those at the same time. I will give you kind of a similar framework, but thinking about your customers. And there are 3 different ways to go. Again, we're going to follow the money and we're going to follow the love. So finding your niche, your core audience, and again, we're going to radiate that like a lighthouse. But this is an example from Nike again. So they focused their first product development and their brand, obviously, on long distance marathoners who happen to be 1% of the population, which does not a company make and not a billion-dollar company make. But it helped them develop a very strong brand presence and again, radiated that like a lighthouse to find aspiring athletes and eventually, couch potatoes, but people who had a drive, maybe more so than, their efforts to actually get out and do it. So again, some of my clients want to start talking to everybody, and that's not going to work. So you start talking to your niche, you find out who loves you and why they love you. You make sure they are wildly happy and, innovate based on their needs. And then you can start growing your market from there and your market share. So again, focus on your current customers first. And this really shouldn't be such a hard fight, but I've fought this for ages. But again, I've seen it work. So, and clients will say, oh, well, I already have those people. Yeah, but you don't always have them forever. So, some companies, cellular companies do this. They just keep the doors spinning. People come in and people go out just as fast. So if you can keep those people, it is the least expensive way to grow your business, is to not have churn and not have to replace your customer base. The other thing that I've learned, 4 years at Purdue, the degree in persuasion, psychology of communications, is that Psychographics are much more powerful than demographics. I'll give you a quick example. Demographics used to be a great way to profile your customers when we had, very few networks. People watched the same TV shows at the same time, and we had life stages that were pretty consistent. But now we can have a 20-year-old CEO, we can have a 30-year-old still living at home, a 40-year-old first-time mom, and a 50-year-old who's going back to school for their next career. So the demographics, in that sense, really don't tell us who to go after, who they are. Psychographics, so Miller High Life, I'll give you an example, was really not about the beer, and it really wasn't about the age of the people that we were talking to. It was the common thread that we found across these people that said, this is, back to being a real man and backbone of America, and not drinking microbrews and crying at commercials, and people who got their trucks dirty, and can fix things. So really understanding those psychographics, they worked against, 25-year-olds who had that mindset, as well as 65-year-olds who had that mindset. And that was trying to find that common thread of psychographics. So very powerful. If you, again, understand why your customers love you, they're going to tell you who they are and what it does for them, as well as what it says about them. Brand strategy. So again, these are mother strategies, mother briefs. So it's, what's my business strategy? Who's my customer? What does my brand stand for? One of the quickest ways to win is to focus on benefits, not attributes. So really flip the script and say, I'm not going to tell them about me as a brand or a product. I need to figure out what's in it for them. And I need to speak to what it does for them and what it says about them. I would also encourage you to know when you are most relevant. And I have a framework for this as well, or an example at least. So point of stain is a term that was coined by Tide, the detergent. And they realized that they spent all this money on television advertising, but when people got to the store, it kind of went out the window and they bought whatever was on sale. So they said, we can only win when we own the moment in their day, week, month, year lives when they are thinking about detergent. So the point of stain is, this is just, you could draw a situation and the thought bubble. So when is your product or service more important to a person than at any other time? When people buy insurance, it's either when something's gone wrong in their lives or somebody they know. So at that moment, they think, oh, I really need insurance. So the point of stain for Tide really was the moment when someone spilled something on themselves or were about to spill something on themselves. It was in that moment that they thought, I hope my detergent can get that out. And that was the moment that their product or service was more important than any other. And they understood that point of stain. So they put stickers on napkin holders in restaurants. So if you're reaching for a napkin, you've either spilled or you're going to spill. They had billboards at blind intersections where usually people slammed on the brakes and got coffee on themselves. So they found those moments in the world when people were thinking about their detergent. So I would encourage you to think about when your product or service is more important than at any other time in someone's day, week, month, year, or life. The other kind of big pillar of brand strategy is, I mentioned talking about benefits, but really understand what your ultimate benefit is. What this is called a magnetic virtue. What is that thing about you that is going to draw people to you magnetically? It's not what you make, it's what you're really selling. Volvo makes cars, but they sell safety for life, I think was their tagline. Harley Davidson makes motorcycles. They sell rebellion, or now they say freedom. And that's a badge brand. So when I say brands, you need to focus on what it says about them. We know it's a badge brand and people care about the image that being a Harley supporter conveys because there are more Harley Davidson stickers on cars than there are Harleys on the road. So, Starbucks is a badge brand. People carry that cup proudly. It says something about them. They care about their coffee, or they care about themselves, or they live in those moments. So that's kind of a different conversation, but related. Southwest Airlines is probably the easiest thing to kind of show you how to ladder up. Southwest Airlines makes cheap domestic air travel possible. You can buy a ticket at any time and it's still going to be inexpensive, which allows you to be spontaneous. Spontaneous maybe could be a magnetic virtue, but doesn't feel like a benefit, a high level benefit. If you are allowed to be spontaneous, that gives you freedom. You are now free to move about the country. Brilliant tagline, kind of based on their magnetic virtue. Westin makes hotel beds, but they sell sanctuary. They're branding the smell of white tea and everything zen. So that's a great exercise for you and your team to go through. And once you know what your magnetic virtue is, I write a manifesto about it, but I won't go into that today, but that will guide everything that you do, and it will make all your decisions much, much easier. I also find that the redheaded stepchild of branding is a brand's voice, especially technology companies. They say, we all sound the same. And I'm like, well, y'all sound the same because you're not focused on creating a unique voice for yourselves, chicken and the egg. But being intentional about your voice can really be very powerful for your brand. Every brand should have a personality. Some are absolutely based on their personality. So Mini Cooper is a BMW, but they don't talk about that. They just present themselves as being a very quirky brand and invite people in based on how they present themselves and what it says about their owners, all based on voice. I also did some work for an accounting firm. And by law, an accounting firm does the same thing as every other accounting firm. So the only way for them to stand out really was how they came across, not only to invite the right kinds of clients, but to invite the right kinds of employees. It was kind of, pulling people and being a magnet for a mindset. And so their noble goal was to make accounting sexy again. And I said, aha, you said again. And they said, yeah, but it was a sexy job when we were going to school, but now you're down with the tax accountants at the cocktail party. So it really was, these guys had an amazing culture. They threw great parties. They were super fun to play with. And so we articulated that in saying, you're more Veuve Clicquot than you are Dom Perignon. Dom's very by the book, very formal, very straightforward. They're going to wear suits to meetings. And Veuve was very much this accounting firm. I think Wyden wrote their first tagline, which was less boring than your average accounting firm. And their manifesto, their magnetic virtue was all based on happiness. They had happy employees, they were going to have happy clients. I call that the Trader Joe's effect. You know that they're enjoying working there and it radiates. The CEO was like, I don't know, this is not serious enough for me. So we really kind of had to sell them on the idea that it was still premium. Like it's still in a premium category. It's just you don't have to be, boring in a pinstripe suit in order to be premium. And once we gave him this example, he kind of was like, oh, I get it now. Okay, that's fine. We're good. And they have doubled in size while still remaining one of the best places to work, which was their goal, which is phenomenal. Creative strategy. So it's really hard to build a creative strategy if you haven't built the foundation with the business, brand, and consumer strategy. But creative strategy is, again, it's kind of like that 85% failure rate if you don't write it down. When I worked for one of the world's biggest ad agencies, global ad agencies, they were like, I don't know why do we need a brief? Like, why do you have to write it down? And at the end of my tenure there, they were like, okay, we get it. We never seem to have enough time to do it right, but we always seem to find time to do it over. And then they actually realized how much money they saved by not doing it over because they only saw how much time we were spending at the front end. But I promise you, it makes for a very profitable company to do the work at the front end. So this is my one-page template. I have a download. You can take it from here. I'm sure Stephen will share this with you. But it's one page and only one page. And the idea is, and it's also not a digital document. I am a firm believer in the power of handwriting something. You can type it up later, but it lets your subconscious vent and come to life. It keeps you from cutting and pasting. There are a whole bunch of reasons. But if you append all the details, this is the idea, is that creative could tear the sheet off the top and take it with them and get the basics of what they need to do in one page. So it kind of gets them reset in the task. It talks about how we would measure it. It talks about who we're talking to. Again, psychographics. Have beliefs drive behaviors. You can't really focus on the behavior. Yeah, you have to know what you want them to do, but you really have to know what they have to believe in order to do what you want them to do. We've got the why they should believe us, which is all the supporting evidence, what we're really selling, which is the magnetic virtue, and the brand's personality. So kind of all those key bits that I talked about, this is the one page where you pull them all together. And this is the hallway conversation, is that one thing we need to tell them. And that should be 7 words and only 7 words. I won't go into all the detail about how to write a great one because I can't do it in this time frame. But if you do all of the thinking that I've said up front before you get to this point, you're not going to go too far wrong. I will tell you also to focus more on the why you want this output as opposed to the what you want the output to be. So I write a brief for every output. If it's a new website, if it's a new ad, if it's a new product design, it's the same brief kind of no matter what you're doing. PR campaign, but focus on the why you want it out there, what you want to have happen more than the rest of it. And again, follow the money and the love, and you're not going to go far wrong. And if you know why your customers love you, that's what you base this on. If you know your point of staying, that's what you base this on, and you're not going to go too far wrong. This is just a quick example of, on the left-hand side was a brief that I was given to sell outdoor gear. The assignment was to create a brand position and a voice. We wanted awareness and consideration, which I say, duh, and then what? 25 to 54-year-olds means nothing to me. They think they don't know our brands, but we need them to think that they need to see the value. But the brief is supposed to answer that question in my mind. What is the value that's going to get them to buy us? So I'll give you, and I don't know about modern and fun for outdoor gear. Those just didn't make sense to me. So on the right-hand side was my rewriting of a brief. We are selling professional grade bad weather outdoor gear. Like just even that clarity puts you in a completely different headspace of what it is that we're trying to do. We needed to build a website, an ad campaign from a position and a voice, so we knew what the outputs were. We were going to steal share from mainstream brands to grow 20%. Sometimes I make that number up, but it was clearly the steal share as opposed to anything else because I don't think they had a really robust core customer group. We were talking to people who may summit a mountain one day. And again, that's kind of a behavior, but it's more psychographic than a demographic. They currently thought, why is this so much more money than everything else? We needed them to think, I'd be nuts to compromise my safety or my fun with less. So what we were really trying to tell them with this brand, you have no limits. You can go anywhere, you can do anything. It's trusted best for a reason. There was heritage, there were awards, there were roots in alpinism, they had innovations, all kinds of things that we could shore up the why they should believe us. And the personality was confident, progressive, and adventurous. So think Sir Edmund Hillary at 30. And again, that is just to inspire, but also to focus efforts on who we're talking to and why they will care about this. What's in it for them? I did write a brief, I have to tell you, book. So if you want all the details, you can find it. And if you need to reach me, this is the best way.
This was great. I
Thanks.
was taking notes. It was, I think every chief revenue officer, CEO, from a startup to a large company needs to be able to go through this with you. Like it was, it helped put them in place of things they need to think about to improve their brand, how to do better, and then you laid out the brief, and I think with more discussion, you can help them write it down and put it in paper to align the whole organization about. So very impressive presentation, Lynette. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. I'm amazed I packed that in there in that time.
Yeah, no, you did. You did great. Now, looking at in audience, feel free to ask questions. We'll put some of this content. We'll create a little group where you can socialize with Lynette. Is all those questions you use up front to formulate? How do you organize? How do you bring the right people together so that they can brainstorm those concepts and get alignment to then create the brief? What is the process you've taken within the organizations you've been with? Because it's a lot of, I'm sure people aren't on the same page and they ponder things differently, but what have you found to be successful?
That's an excellent question. And I have a visual around it, but it's basically an X. So it's getting a wide amount of information from everybody. You come down to the brief, which is a pinnacle, and you have one author for the brief, and then you can radiate it back out to other people. So I have done an internal survey so that everybody has a chance to say, one of my great brief questions is, what do you say at cocktail parties or dinner parties about the brand? And if you all say the same things, you have a strong brand. If you say things a little bit differently, you have a weak brand. But I try to capture that from everybody. So I get a sense for what they think the core of the brand is. I'll ask them, what are opportunities? Who do you think we're talking to? So discovery is from everyone. But the workshop that I do around briefs is only leadership, executive team. Of really getting alignment across the organization, from product to sales to creative director to, I'm doing one like the CFO. Like, if leadership team is aligned, then we're not going to go too far wrong, at least at a high level business setting. If it's a creative department, I get creative and account service, strategist, media. So core people. If you have more than 10, you're setting yourself up for, I'm not going to say failure, but really unfun and too much compromise. So key people, and then there is one author. This is, writing a brief is not a team sport. So if you do it as a team sport, you're going to have a lot of compromise and a lot of still fragmented thinking. So the key to writing a good brief is it has to hang together. It has to be a clear point of view on not what the problem is per se, but this is what the problem is, and this is what I think we should do to solve it. This is where I think we should go. I would say it's where on the canvas should we start, as opposed to these are the colors to use, or this is what I want you to paint. And then we get everybody back together and say, this is the brief we came up with. Let's talk about it. If you have massive dissension, let's talk about that. But basically, at the end of that, we all have to hold hands and agree we're going to march forward with one plan.
And who should own creating the process and writing the brief? Is there a suggested person in organization that you recommend?
Yeah, well, I always say it's whoever has the time and inclination. So some people are more adept at doing this than others. If you have a strategist on staff, fabulous. A chief strategy officer, fabulous. If you don't, sometimes the CEO has written the brief. Sometimes the account person has written the brief. I will say the danger of that is sometimes that can be a little less inspirational and be a little more tick the boxes of, is all the product stuff in there? Or hire an outside person. I mean, you don't have to do it that often. So once you get it, then it's just executing against it. But I would say whoever has the inclination and is not, so it's an organic document. It's supposed to be more of a Pied Piper than a policeman, but someone who's not going to cave. When somebody says, it's a little too hard, or maybe, let's soften that up. But to say, no, this is the right way to go. And I'll show you examples of other companies who have done it and done it well, who's really going to be the champion. for the brief. And I would say that's a mindset more than a title.
And how do you, taking a little deeper here, now once you go through that process, alignment, you go through what you put together, and then you write this killer brief, executing it and keeping people on the same page, what are strategies for that? Because I imagine, marketing may go out and say, great, I saw that, but I changed my mind the next day. Or the CEO, who may have ADD, is changing his mind all the time. So how do you ensure alignment and flexibility to ensure you're going somewhere instead of maybe everyone's separate directions?
Right. Excellent. There are a couple of ways to do it. If you have a strategist or the champion of the brief, I think it's important to present the brief before you present the work and say, this is what we said we were going to do, and this is what we should measure this work against. I also have asked companies like Columbia. They have, hang tag people and website people and product people and everywhere. So we had a wall, and I've had digitally some people use a Miro board and go, let's see our work. From a consumer standpoint, does it all hang together? Does it look like it's coming from one company? It's not about just applying the brand colors. And if some are off, then that's kind of peer pressure to say, hey, you're not on brief, or maybe we need to amend the brief because this is right, and we just didn't articulate it correctly. But I think culture is about pinky swears. And if we all kind of pinky swear that we're going to experiment with this, and we're going to try to do it right and stay on brief, then it's kind of however you manage your accountability. We'd have strategy reviews, once a month, and say, what was the brief? What were the ads? Even stuff that you weren't working on. We had the leadership team do it. What was the brief? What was the work? And, do they line up? Do they not line up? And where is it falling off the tracks? Stan, who was my first best boss and still the smartest man I know, Richards, he would have he would have the creative department use the one thing we need to tell them from the brief, like no limits. They would have to use that as the tagline for their work when they presented draft work to him. So if the tagline fell down, we didn't do a good enough job as a strategist. If it didn't make sense with the work that they were showing, then they didn't follow the brief. But it was kind of a public review, internally, to say, are you both ends, are creative and strategy holding up their ends of the bargain? And, obviously
right.
Account people would get that alignment with clients, and I think their accountability to the brief was more important even than internal. So you can't change your mind midstream.
Yeah. No, that's good. This one came from last session that I think I'll apply to this session. You've given the principles, you've given the framework to write the mother of all briefs, and it was perfect. You may have people in organizations, and you show the chart, 85% fail, who are like, okay, I believe in it, I want to do it, but I don't know if I have alignment. What are some simple steps I can take, to get everybody towards this direction, but they might not want to be ready to invest all this time? But what are like some simple things I can do to get this thing moving, right, in my organization so I can get this alignment happening? Well,
there are two ways to do it, I think. One is to add a leadership team session, be the champion, explain the benefits. I would have even just at workshops that I do it in one-day workshop and say, this is what a brief is, this is kind of why you do it, this is how you do it. It's really not that difficult. You can do it in 20 minutes once you get good at it, and get them to just try it on new business only. Or if you've had, so like the Richards Group had Motel 6, still does, longest running radio campaign in history, I think. But every year we'd pull it apart and put it back together. And if you're kind of finding yourself being a little rote in your thinking, that's a great time to do a workshop and say, let's get some new thinking around this brand so that we are not in danger of losing it or having it go into review. So either, educate them and convince them, or do it anyway, which I have done at several agencies who didn't really understand what we were doing. But at Pinky swore with some creative guys who were like really tired of do-overs. Please help us go do this. So I would write a brief for them and help sell it through, but I didn't show it to anybody except the creative department. We just kind of agreed that I was going to help them find the right platform and that I was going to help them sell it internally with good thinking. And then there's also, how do we get insights? I would literally go out into the world and just talk to people and say, I got some insights from 2 people. And the client would say, oh my God, 2 people, that's not research. And I said, I didn't call it research. I called it creative development. And the alternative is we sit in the back room and we make it up. And I don't know how that's any more valid. I've just done it anyway for quite a while, and just improved my work. It improved our creative team's work. And then once we saw how fast it kind of went through the system and actually had work that worked, then everybody was like, well, what are you doing differently? And I want some of that. And, tell me about this, that, or the other. So that's what I mean kind of by the Pied Piper. If they don't buy into it, show them the results, and then they'll want to play.
Yeah, that's great feedback for them. What about, and this came from last session too, and I think he might still be on the call here, is for secretive organizations where marketing, where their strategy is something, it might be new product release, so they don't want to tell people, where this information about this could be more secretive. How do you bring people together to create something and then keep it secret amongst the people that need to know or not, right? Have you had that encounter where maybe it's a new product release like Apple, or there's a new Nike shoe coming out that they don't want people to know about yet until it happens? Any suggestions there?
I've, worked for agencies within agencies, for sure. They're kind of rogue and doing super secretive work. And so I would just write the brief within that cone of silence, within that circle. Like, that's just about agreements and alignment. And if you want to do some research without tipping people off, there are all kinds of things where, we Google people, we make sure they don't work for competitors, we get them to sign NDAs. But I've also done entire focus groups without ever, they're blind, right? So they never know who the client is. But the questions aren't really so brand specific. Sometimes it's about benefits of a product. Sometimes it's about the competitive marketplace. It's about their problems and solutions. Like, you can get all kinds of insights without ever mentioning a brand name. So there's secret research.
That's very helpful. Any thing that you would like to say to the group before we end? Any advice you have for them that you haven't said yet that you'd like to mention?
I will say that if you have a penchant, a leaning toward briefs, either because they're going to make life easier or because it just feels like the right thing to do, or it's a way to stretch your creative muscles, if you can write a great brief, you will always have a job. And aside from your resume, it's a great way to show your thinking and your role in the process and your contribution. And then if you have a brief to show if you're interviewing with some work that came out of it, at least in the communications field, it's a reel. It's maybe more powerful than a testimonial. It's more powerful than, how many years you've worked at a place. It is, it's proof of what you can bring to the party. And they're super fun to write. And so I say it's a skill that, even if your company doesn't buy into it, is a skill that you should develop for yourself. And
you have workshops, right? You have a book that talk about that as well, and you have personal coaching sessions.
Yes.
So Lynette, thank you. This is I mean, every time I sit and chat with you or you appear in a podcast, we learn so much. Very clear, strategic focus on how to create brief strategy for 2024. This is something that all of us, every organization needs to adopt for sure. The ROI is tremendous, so we thank you for sharing it with our summit today. And thank you, all the participants, for joining. We thank, for those that will listen later, we're going to create a group where you can join, see the recording. Lynette can share some of the forms she shared today. And we hope you reach out to her, ask her. We'd
Please.
like to be. We're a big facilitator. Tremendous lady, lots of knowledge that can benefit your organization. So thank you, Lynette.
Thank you for having me. This was immense, and I'm thrilled to meet your audience.
Thank you very much. And then our next one will start in 15 minutes, and we'll have Peter Leviton with us.
He's
So
awesome.
signing off, and we'll see you in 15 minutes.